of the territories that we are actually standing on, working on, playing on, and everything living on. A lot of us are living on this territory, which is the Algonquin Anishinaabe Aki territory. And we acknowledge also that we are guests on this territory, many of us. And I am, and we're in Ottawa, which is the capital city in the country, of course, of Canada. And we want to start off this session with a piece of music. Well, that started out as poetry with Patsy, and that we put music and drumming together for this piece. And it's kind of appropriate based on the fact that we're coming from different corners of the planet at the moment. And this is a song for the earth. And we'll try not to.
Oh yeah, hey. Oh yeah, hi. Oh yeah, hey. Oh yeah, hi. In the sky, eagles fly. Spirit of the north, hear our cry. Hey, oh yeah, hey, oh yeah, hi. Oh yeah, hey, oh yeah, hi. In the sky, condors fly. Spirit of the south, dry our eyes. Hey, hey, oh yeah, hey, oh yeah, hi. Oh yeah, hey, oh yeah, hi. Kijigon, Kuidinoze, Kichimegeze, Kijigon, Kijigon, Shawanoze, Kichiwinange, Kijigon. Oh yeah, hey, hey, hey. Oh yeah, hi. Oh yeah, hey, oh yeah, hi. In the sea, east and west, majestic winds keep history. Hey, oh yeah, hey, oh yeah, oh yeah, hey, oh yeah. Oh yeah, hey, oh yeah. Oh yeah, hey. Oh yeah, hey. Oh yeah, hey. Oh yeah.
Miigwech, Wilan.
Thank you for that. Now, I believe you guys want to continue with the next part of your opening.
I think we're good, Rob.
Okay, then we'll move ahead. I just wanted to make sure that you had your time.
No, thank
Okay.
you, thank you. That's Miigwech.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll try to be brief. I have a horrible cold, so please excuse me. Okay, I want to tell you the lineup of guests we have tonight. We have a small but vital crew of people connecting here tonight. The order of appearance of the panelists will be first, Brianna Palmer and Carmela Alfaro Lagance from McMaster University, joining us live from Hamilton. Second will be Kiara Ministerelli from the London College of Communication in England, joining us. Following Kiara will be Mary Modine from the University of Dundee in Scotland. And our Antipodean friend, Laura Donkers, joining us from New Zealand. And then we'll round up with two familiar faces, the co-founders of No Borders and many, many other projects here locally on Turtle Island in Ottawa, Patsy Griffin and Carmel Whittle. We'll try to have all of these panelists discuss some interesting projects that relate to the theme of collaboration and decolonization, and relate to any collaborations they've had with us or anything they want to share, and also maybe some things they have coming up or some directions they want to go into. Following that, I'll try to keep those presentations on time with flexibility. So 12 minutes or so, and there'll be some visual presentations in that stream. Afterwards, we will be soliciting questions from the audience via chat, and I put some info on chat already, and we will try to get to all of them as time permits. And all of this is being recorded, and we will be able to share the video and all chat. I'll just put it to Carmel if she could also turn on the recording so we have a backup copy. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over right now. Our panelists will first of all be asked to introduce themselves better than I could. So please, Brianna and Carmela, could you now begin?
Thank you, Rob. We're just going to share our screen here, so let us know when we're sharing. Good.
Can everyone
You're
hear
on
me?
screen. Yes, you're on screen and audio is good.
Perfect.
So do you want to start?
Okay.
Okay, so
Oh, yeah, sorry.
well, doesn't matter. We practiced. terrible at speaking. So I'll let you go.
Okay. Yeah, so our first slide is this website that we often look at. It's the nativeland.ca. So if any of you have ever come across it or haven't, it'd be interesting to check out. And it sort of, I love the map because it sort of, again, is this gesture for us when we open up our sort of presentations, and it's kind of fitting with the theme of no borders. There's sort of delineations of where various Indigenous groups live across Turtle Island. And the map is constantly evolving and expanding and being contributed to. So I'd encourage everyone to check it out if they haven't. But currently, like Brianna and I right now are on the, are really grateful to be here living on the lands of the Mississaugas of the credits of the First Nation of the Anishinaabe Nation, whose ancestral territory we currently reside in. We, of course, want to acknowledge the Haudenosaunee Nations, whose granted lands here around the Hamilton area extend for 6 miles on both sides of the Grand River from its mouth to its source. And we also think about often the communities that we're a part of and sort of their struggles and their resilience. And that often really inspires us. So this is just an image of the resistance on 1492 Land Back Lane with our community members at Six Nations. And they have been resisting a developer coming and taking over their lands to build housing development, basically. And just recently in July of 2021, the developer decided to back off. So it's a temporary win for our neighbors and our community. And it's also nice to think about this in the context of having the National Truth and Reconciliation Day that has been named yesterday. So, and because of that, 1492 Land Back Lane launched a Unity Jam concert that was held in Toronto yesterday as well. But they often do a lot of different activities all over the region. So we're always really wanting to support this group of people. And so we'll just move to the next slide here.
Yeah. So, well, who we are, as we've been introduced, these are the pictures our parents never got for graduation, because we kind of bucked the trend on thinking about what that means. Because I think we always think of ourselves as constant students and always learning. We met actually probably close to 18 years ago. I think something like that, where we both kind of landed in Elliott Lake for our first teaching jobs at White Mountain Academy. If anybody ever remembers that, it was a school opened up where students were going to learn both traditional Indigenous studies and this Western studies as well, and that those two things were going to be parallel. And our experience up there was just something that we still carry with us. Yvonne Mayawasaki, who was the practitioner and taught us so much. And I think we're still, those are life lessons that we've been carrying with us. And just by luck and chance, we both got jobs at McMaster University and are trying to kind of continue that work and continue trying to really think about truth and reconciliation in all of our practices and embed it into our program as well. So we'll be fast because I know we're going to take long here. You want to go? It's your turn.
Yeah. So again, when we think about our positionality and our relationship to the land, I always have to think about my ethnic background. And again, my parents were originally from the Philippines, who were deeply impacted by the colonial project, and pretty much most of their Indigenous cultural history was erased. And there's a few tribes scattered throughout the Philippines that have managed to hang on, and they are still the ones that are defending the land. And this image is an image of the Dumagat tribe, who is in a constant fight with actually a Canadian mining company that's mining gold in their region and devastating their lands. So again, I think about our place in Canada, but I also think about all the land defenders across the world that continue to be resilient and fight.
So, and my background is that I'm a classic white. I always think of, I grew up in a loaf of Wonder Bread because I had no clue what was going on. I grew up in a really small town in Revelstoke, BC. And I think as a Euro settler, I think I don't really know my history, but I think we date back probably early colonizers. So, I really didn't have any kind of idea or understanding growing up, but, just learning what I was taught in school, those social ideologies were never pushed. I never really thought about it until in my early 20s, I read this one book called by Ruby Weeb, The Voice of the Almighty, or Where's the Voice Coming From? And really thinking about that other perspective. And so as a printmaker going through university and thinking about the dissemination of language and how perceptions of ideas and truth, I really started to really think about my own position and try and tip all those kind of social ideologies, the learning, the history on its head. So my work is, my research is basically taking all of those narratives, if you want to go to the next slide. No, my little, so this is my work. I'm a visual artist. So this is actually an exhibition in Grand Forks, BC right now. And it's called Traversing the Line with No Fixed Point. And where I really take all of that kind of history and knowledge that I learned as a young student and tip it on its head and decenter that colonial lens and really try and reposition and make people think about what is truth, what is reality. Growing up in BC, there was never really talk about the Highway of Tears, but if you look on the slide, you can see this outline along the top of the where the mountain is, and that is the actual line of the Highway of Tears, where so many murdered and missing women and girls have been found, and living and having that kind of 6 hours away and not knowing about it at all. This also piece. When I was doing it, again, they just found, which as Carmel has said, people knew already the children in the residential schools, but trying to kind of give memory to that. I wanted this not to be an exhibition where people could look and walk away and go, oh, I wanted them to really kind of lay an action there. So there's a bunch of shoes where they can paste and give tribute to all of the violence that has happened to the Indigenous communities across Canada. And then I'll give it back to you.
Thanks. And so this is just a quick example of my work, which I did over the pandemic, and it's basically an interactive installation based around music. And it's really in response to the impact of the colonization in the Philippines. And I basically wanted to create a space that referenced some pre-colonial music and instrumentation mixed with sort of newer music that has emerged from the Filipino diaspora. So it's a space where people can gather, make music together, and again, in reference to my cultural background. And there's another sort of view of it. So I basically cast bronze. The instrument's called a cooling tongue. And so I cast a sort of futurist version of that instrument. And this is a project it's very fresh. It just launched yesterday, but it's a collaborative project sort of facilitated by Sensorium, which is a research center at York University. So it's basically a virtual space that provides cultural context to the public health crisis that we've all been experiencing this past year. And the works are all these VR spaces and XR spaces, and they focus on artists that are marginalized or approach topics of marginalization in their work. And they also explore the interconnections between Anishinaabeg ontologies and microscopic imagery and other ideas that explore the Asian diaspora. And so, you know, with Brianna's research practice and mine as well, these are things that sort of that come in and are embedded in how we teach and how we interact with our students and our community. And these relationships between us, our students and our community are really vital to our mutual learning and understanding. And some of these, so we've engaged in a lot of different community projects, and these are just a few of them.
So this was a conference that we did called Art for Change, and it was Unmasking Rape Culture. So really thinking about giving a voice and power to the victims of rape, and trying to make that society kind of understand that there is a culture in which rape does happen, and how does this affect everyone. And so our students, we had artists, we had people from community organizations such as Center 3, Sasha, and ourselves and our students put on exhibitions, organized talks and discussions about rape culture and how we can affect change. Oh, you want to go on this one? Or do you
Okay,
want me?
go ahead.
Well, another one, because then she has to do the other two. So, so another one we did was called Defying Barriers, where we're really looking at spaces and thinking about who has access and who has a seat at the table for, you know, and thinking about the kind of colonial ideals of how we every day we interact with spaces, with machines, with equipment, with any kind of process or anything. So Defying Barriers, we brought together a one-day workshop to imagine accessible production, exhibition, and performance spaces. So we brought in Rebecca Baird and David Bobier to talk about their research practices, and members of the community, and to really kind of figure out how we can change the landscape and really make it accessible for everyone. So
yeah, it was great. It was because we had like a number of community members that were living with various disabilities come to Center 3 for Artistic and Social Practice and do an audit on their space. And then those are followed up by great breakout sessions with the community. So you can see here in this image, we were all spread out and brainstorming all the different issues and ways that we could make things a lot more accessible and inclusive within the context of art production, art and knowledge sharing.
this is yours.
Oh, geez. Okay, sorry. And so another big project that we did that involved all our community members and students and campus community was held in 2019, and it was called The Reception, which was a 2-day forum that aimed to help decenter the Western canon within our arts institutions in the region through community building and advocacy and socially engaged arts events, workshops, and also a dinner that was a participatory lecture and relational banquet. So again, this was a huge collaboration between McMaster, York, Socrates Project, Center 3 for Artistic and Social Practice, Center for Margins, COBRA, which is the Coalition of Black and Racialized Artists in Hamilton, and the new committee at the Hamilton Artists Inc. And so some of our speakers included David McDonald, who is the author of The Sleeping Giant Awakes, Genocide, Indian Residential Schools, and the Challenge of Conciliation. We also had Elwood Jimmy that talked about, who was the co-author of the book, Towards Braiding. So we had a really interesting sort of conversation about ideas within the book. There were workshops by Nicole Carruth, Lisa Hoffman, which were on BIPOC allyship. And like those are just a few, and it was pretty incredible. Again, 2 days. There was a communal style feast, sort of again referencing, oops, I'll just move this over, referencing the Filipino Kamayan dinner, which is the idea of sharing food with each other. so it was based in hospitality, celebration, as well as activism and solidarity. So Marissa Largo talked about the Kamayan feast, and the entire meal was made by Corona Caste, who is a mixed Haudenosaunee Mohawk woman from White Pines Catering. And so throughout every course that was served, she talked about the food that we were eating and ideas about Indigenous food sovereignty and food as medicine. And so it was an incredible meal. And then after that, we had various artist performances. So this is Kiera Bolt doing a performance called Kiki Gets Canceled. And then we also brought in DJ Shub, who was from Tribe Called Red and Hallucination, I think now. And so born out of this desire to bring BIPOC arts communities together to improve the current cultural landscape, the event was intended to strengthen, again, the arts sector in Southwestern Ontario, and just to provide opportunities for shared learning and networking in the arts, and again, specifically focused on BIPOC artists and cultural workers.
Wow, guys.
Are we over?
Well, I'm nudging you for time because we do have a lot to cover.
Okay.
And I think that we're going to be inviting people back for follow-ups. I mean, we could do a whole workshop with you guys. Do you have much more to cover yourselves?
Well, no, we only had 2. We put ourselves as 15 minutes away.
Okay.
But we can quit now. This was just another, like, if you have 2 more minutes, we can finish really fast.
Okay, not to rush you. Okay, good. Thank you.
No. Well, we were just gonna, another project that actually our colleagues are working on is Sally Mackay and Judy Major Gerardin, is a water project, and it's actually rejuvenating parking lot M that was a floodland, and having a whole bunch of community participants in an Indigenous lens, and also Indigenous community members coming together and trying to reclaim this parking lot that floods all the time and restore it back to its natural habitat. And then lastly, we will just end with our students. And when we think about, like, when we with McMaster, embedded in our, as Carmela was saying, was our social kind of justice, and really thinking about having them go out and participate and read. You know, last year, your podcast 83 was so fantastic. Our 4th years and 3rd years listened to it, and they had all these other readings, but I have to say that one had the most kind of real conversation, and really hit home to a lot of people, a lot of students that really enjoyed that podcast. So we're actually looking forward to having more.
and this is just a slide because they pulled down the John A. Macdonald statue in Hamilton in August, and quite a few of our students, I don't want to out them, you know, that's all I'll say.
Anyways, so sorry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Wow, beautiful.
No, thank you so much. I was totally blown away by your work and all of the projects. And if you look in the chat, the audience, like everyone was blown away. So thank you so much. And we're going to have to follow up. But I think we're going to have to move right along in the schedule because there are a lot of other interesting things to hear. So we're going to go to Kiara Ministerelli now. So Kiara, take it away.
Thanks, Rob. And I was blown away. It's really amazing work that you're doing, Brian and Carmela. It really, I was very impressed by the amazing work that you do with your practice, with your research, with, you know, communities and students. It's really great. And it would be nice to do something in the future, or, you know, when things go back to normal, perhaps even organize something, a transnational connection. So and thanks for having me here. So unfortunately, I don't have a presentation, but hopefully I can just sketch, because I just wanted to talk about some work that I'm doing and some work in process, and I don't have permission to share some of the images, also some of the preliminary work. So hopefully it won't be too boring. So as Rob said, I'm Kiara Ministerelli, and I currently work in London at the London College of Communication, and I'm a senior lecturer in media and communications there. But I've got a kind of an interesting background because I'm Italian, and in 2007 I moved to Australia. And when I moved there, I had done in my BA a little bit of Indigenous Studies and Australian Studies, and so I was fascinated by the whole thing. But I went to Australia actually to teach Italian in a secondary school. And when I was there, I was totally impressed by the lack of Indigenous representation, of voice and presence. I was based in Melbourne, South Australia, so in Victoria, the state of Victoria. And so I was really trying to get some answers, and I had lots of questions. And so I was trying to understand why there was no presence, Indigenous presence, which was visible even in the city. I thought, there would be more signs or some sort of commemorative artifact or element, and there are, but they're quite hidden, especially at that time. So I did some research, and I've always been interested in equality and justice. I've always been in politics and activism, doing activism also in Italy, and it really struck me to see the kind of conditions a lot of communities were living in. And so I started going to rallies, joining different communities and talking to people. And I met some really amazing people who were, telling me that there was a total lack of recognition. Indigenous voices were silenced, and there's a long way to go. And then in the following years, we had a change in government. We had an official apology, which was really welcomed as something amazing, as a very important and symbolic act. But there was no following to that, unfortunately. And there was the sad reality is that there was a lot of work to do still. But over time, we're seeing small changes these days, but still a lot of work needs to be done. So when I was there, eventually, it's a long story short, I ended up doing a PhD in Indigenous Studies. And this really made me reconsider my whole world. I was already doing some work with communities and Indigenous communities in Australia. And then some members of those communities and some elders were interested in my ideas and my passions. And so I decided to start this journey, and I ended up staying in Australia for 8 years. And I thought I would stay there for a very long time, but we know the visa regulations and the complexities of staying in Australia for migrants. But also when I was doing that, at the time, the term decolonization wasn't even a thing. It was very not very popular term. Now it's a buzzword everywhere, and especially in the UK, and it's used in the most disparate context, and sometimes even in the wrong way. And back then I had a lot of discussions around decolonization in terms of my own ontologies and epistemologies and my own worldview, and at the same time also talking about decolonization in terms of land and Indigenous claims and what it meant. But a lot of the work that I was doing internally was trying to understand my own, as also Carmela and Brianna said, but Brianna in particular, my own positionality and what it means to be a white European woman within that kind of environment, and what my work does, what I need to actually to do within that, because obviously it doesn't make sense for me to intervene in a place, in a country where there are so many complexities without being wanted or invited. So I had to learn. It was very hard to learn how to, I don't want to use the term decolonize here, but this is something that back then I was working around decolonizing the mind, decolonizing knowledges and frameworks and ways of understanding the world. And this approach really took me a very long time to understand those meanings in terms of my own cultural background. I had never considered where I was coming from, my own cultural aspects, and some of the questions around language in particular really then started to resonate with me in many ways. Obviously, I come from a very different background, very different country, but I come from a small community, which is a minority, linguistic minority in Italy. And growing up, I was speaking that language, and obviously I felt ashamed because it wasn't seen as part of the main dominant language. And so I didn't want to speak it. And when my collaborators, the people I was talking to, were speaking about that, it made me think how I should have also been reconsidering and analyzing my own stories, but not to actually take advantage from that and claiming some sort of minority status or some sort of privilege again, but in order to understand better what formed me and why I was attracted in some ways to help people share their stories and make their voices to be heard. So I wanted to use my own privilege in some ways to just make those stories prominent and prevalent and relevant today. So I then started this PhD on Aboriginal hip hop in Australia. I was part of the hip hop community myself as a breakdancer, so I was kind of facilitated by that because, of course, I had access to some areas, and I was welcomed not as a researcher or someone external, but in some ways as a part of the community. So it was, much easier for me to speak the same language in some ways. And I spent a lot of time liaising and talking to people who had a passion in hip hop and trying to understand why a lot of the younger generations in Australia, both people in urban centers and people also remote, love hip hop so much. So there were all these interesting connections and all these discussions, and eventually it's all about trying to create a sense of self-esteem, of identity, and also hip hop gave a voice to a lot of these younger generations who didn't feel they could have a voice. So they were actually using that in many ways, in political terms, in political ways, to assert who they were and talk about issues like Black deaths in custody, which is a major issue in Australia still, and also questions around identity. There is a whole question around what it means to be Aboriginal today, and in particular for first-kin Aboriginal people. And there are many complexities. And so music really gave, in particular hip hop, a lot of power and a platform to express themselves. And so it was a great experience. And then a book came out, and it's not my book, but I see that as the work of the people I collaborated with. And obviously it's thanks to those stories that I managed to put something together. But the idea was not for me to derive some benefit from it. I just wanted those stories and the music to be heard, to be known. So my idea, I thought, when I do this, I want to create then, bridges. I want to create some networks for these people to be known elsewhere, for their stories to be heard, because I did recognize that sometimes, especially also in politics and questions around even treaties and sovereignty within nation states, some international pressure can help. So I thought, let me do what I can, and let me also try to amplify those voices and stories, and see in what ways I can make them popular, or I can actually create connections. And so I started to do this kind of work when I could, and with the tools at my disposal. So then unfortunately I had to leave Australia, and I wasn't very happy about that, but it's something that I had to do, and I ended up going to the States. And there in the States I met amazing First Nations people, artists and amazing poets and hip hop artists. And again, I was when I was teaching at Lehigh University for a very short time, I organized a symposium with them, and it was really amazing work, because I got to know, and I got also to see how American students are not aware of the pressing issues that the First Nations in the United States are facing. I remember organizing this amazing concert with a great artist called Frank Walden. And he's really good. If you get a chance to see his work, please do it. And Frank was really talking from the heart about his experience and the suffering and the pain. And then I'm going to write in the chat if you want to just check his music. And so when I was and when my students were listening to that after the concert and after the talks, I asked them what they thought about it. And some students said that they felt intimidated and they felt that these native guys were threatening their own patriotism. And I was really shocked to hear those words. Instead of feeling the pain and instead of feeling empathy, they felt threatened. Their identity felt threatened. So I thought we need to do a lot of work, especially in the classroom. There needs to be something more than just these occasional lectures or events. And so I was hoping to do more with this, because I noticed that there is a need for those voices to be again heard and those stories to be out in the public. And so I made more connections there, but then I left and I ended up in the UK, where I've discovered that there is a very interesting community here of Indigenous peoples from around the world. And I've been then interested in looking at the ways in which London, as the center of the empire, in some ways attracts those communities and attracts people together again. So I'm now working on a VR project with a Torres Strait Islander artist, Mau Power, and a Sierra Leone artist who resides in London, and a VR artist. And we're looking at ways in which these artists, first of all, coming from different Indigenous traditions, come together in London, and how they engage with the empire. So the relationship between also Indigenous mobilities and how specific artifacts that belong to that culture now have moved from the place of origin to the UK, that travels, their histories and their relevance to the original communities. And so we're going to do something quite interesting. That will be performing and connecting in the performance with the object, and we'll create an experience for audiences and to engage actively and learn these stories that are not often heard. So we're still working on this. It's very early stages, so we're really hoping to create something nice. We've got a very small fund, and hopefully we can get something more. But over the years, I've been trying to do these, to create workshops, to create these spaces for dialogue to happen. And a few years ago also, and then I'm going to finish, I also organized a series of events called Sonic Futures, and Sonic Futures were workshops for students from disenfranchised backgrounds. Eventually, unfortunately, none of those students from those marginalized backgrounds came, but we had some amazing master students from different countries from around the world, from Sierra Leone to India, China, many places around the world. And we invited guests, again, Indigenous scholars from Australia, people from various parts of the globe, and we tackled issues around regeneration and gentrification, around gardening and sustainability. We went around London trying to identify how our own stories were merging into the stories of local Londoners and local communities of migrants. So, and unfortunately then COVID happened, so everything stopped, but we're hopefully trying to resume these kind of workshops and the activities. So it's, I'm always interested in talking about stories, in learning new stories and learning how our own experiences can also come together to create alliances and amplify the voices of those who are not often heard and left at the margins. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll be happy to respond to questions if you have any. Thanks.
Wow.
Wow, thank you so much, Kiara. I know I have some questions, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut and move things along and let the audience and others ask later. That was just fascinating. I had a few reflections I sent you on chat. Now, to move things along in our program and to hear some more wonderful projects and insights, Let's go to Mary Modine.
Bonjour, Kiara, greetings. I'm going to share my screen because I'd like to talk over the top of some images to share with you. Oops, let's see. Can you see that? Yeah, great, excellent. Okay, right, so I'm speaking to you from Scotland. You can tell by my accent that I'm not a native Scot, but I've been here for over 30 years. So a long time, a lifetime, half a lifetime. You know, I'm going to show you very, very briefly a series of work because it's the work I'd like to concentrate on. But just to say that my origins, I'm a dual national. I'm both US, UK. So my matrilineal line is Ojibwe, Anishinaabe from Chippewa, Fond du Lac Reservation in Minnesota. And my patrilineal line, my father was first generation American whose parents were Scandinavian, Swedish. So I come from a kind of a mixed bag, First Nation and Indigenous. So I'm going to share with you some of my concerns. You know, I think that kind of origin, as brief as it was, has shaped me profoundly. I've moved and traveled the world. As a youngster, my family moved and moved. I've lived in many places and I've researched in many places. And this image, this first image I'm showing you is some of my artwork that I made from visiting and working recently with the Caiçara fishermen in Brazil. The Caiçara are indigenous fishermen who are lived pretty much a kind of unchanged lifestyle for at least 300 years until about the last 10. Their lives have changed profoundly. So in that, what I'm showing you here is a current book project. I'm editing a book with the contribution of about 14 other people. And it comes out of a residency. I'm currently also, in addition to being on the staff in Dundee, I'm also a visiting, well, virtually visiting fellow at the University of Minnesota through the Institute of Advanced Studies. So I organized this last year during lockdowns, 3 PhD symposia with artists and academics that was based on place-based research and particularly decolonizing place-based art research, which is the title of our book. And this is one of the first pages of my contribution in this book that's currently being compiled. It's considering decolonization. And what I set out to do in this essay is to try to define what decolonization might mean, actually, and how the various definitions of decolonization as a practice, as an ethical practice, as an investigation, as a discourse, at its very premise seeks not to impose one contemporary understanding, one voice, or one singular platform, but instead to embrace multiplicity and diversity and to restore, or in some cases regenerate, recover the marginalized voices or lifestyles of people of the past. And in this kind of investigation through the works of art, through many people, and through the perspective of the contributors, who include people from around the world, there is a kind of an attempt to look at the kind of different voices and the different kinds of ways that people think about how that kind of embracement of multiplicity takes place. And so in doing this, ethical considerations and the respect for individual voices is paramount. I'm going to move on. In thinking about place as a lifetime of work, we think about the past in many ways. The past is a way to touch back on practices of people from the past in their relationships to the land. And the kind of ways, particularly that fascinate me and have fascinated me for a very long time, has been the kind of question about the knowledge that indigeneity represents. So to me, indigeneity is a gift of knowledge that's based on how particular lifestyles are balanced in relationship to the environment for the people and non-human animals and plants and life forms that inhabit the particular place. So something incredible like this cliff dwellers ruins from Mesa are fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because there is a kind of balance that's unique, that's struck between a kind of pattern of living that in every way had to be sustainable, and in response to the materials, the climate, the needs, the kind of pattern of life that's established in a particular place. And so a page like this is in the book because decolonizing is going back to a kind of sense about searching for those multiple kinds of answers. At the same time, I'm also guest editing an Open Rivers e-journal that is also issued out of the University of Minnesota. And this issue that I'm compiling, to which I invited both Laura, who's with us, you'll hear from her next, and Robert, with the addition of help from Carmel and Patsy, and several others, actually 14 people from across the world are contributing to this particular upcoming issue. And it's almost, not quite, but almost compiled at this point. So we'll be out later this autumn. I'm also currently working with a funded research project called the Rural Reimagined. It is connecting Irish and Scottish artists and writers in a focus on rural practices and narratives. So it is my long-standing endeavor, again, to think about people in place, in situ, many peoples, many places, but putting that kind of conversation together, because I think more than ever at this point, at this time in our conscious awareness of how we have been living an unsustainable balance of life, that looking at the rural is an opportunity to look at patterns where people are facing on an everyday basis some of the most urgent questions that have to do with materials, planet, food, water, clean air, and some of the basics. This is a piece I made a few years back, but I've been exhibiting recently in China. I organized an exhibition, a very large exhibition of works by artists from New Jersey, from China, and from Scotland. And the 45 artists all together, the exhibition is called Confluence, Tradition in Contemporary Art. And it's thinking about, once again, how that kind of idea about traditional life patterns, traditional folk lives can be instrumental in touching on relationships of people in their immediate environment, and how or whether the tradition of patterns of working with materials in order to create a habitat or an environment or sustain a kind of gardening, farming, fishing, crafting, rural existence. And for islanders, it's all of the above, because islanders do all of those and more. It's how all of these things come together as a pattern of life. So I made this particular piece, and it's with I commissioned a friend who blows glass to help me make the component parts that are made out of hand-blown glass. So I too was trained as a printmaker, a lifetime of printmaking, mostly first as a stone lithographer, and then moving into all sorts of other ways of working. When I make an image as a print, I've been working with, for decades, I've been working with images from landscape, but never with the intention of representing solely one landscape. Rather, my intention is to evoke a kind of sense about questions of perception. And the landscape that you see in front of you is not one landscape, but many. And it shifts. The more you look at it, the more it shifts. The more you see that there are other things in other places, and it's not just one place, but it evokes a quality of memory. It evokes a question about the nature of perception. And ultimately, it unseats that certainty about ever taking in one place at one time without realizing that the very nature of perception and interpretation is to build on other things, other types of experiences, the past and other cultures and other places, other times, and our own growing experience. I make artist books. That's part of my kind of genre. But writing and artwork for me stem from the same kind of wellspring. So I see them as part and parcel of the same kind of thing. That working with artistic materials and working with creative writing or with academic writing, which I've been doing a good deal of lately, all stem from that same kind of source of thinking and questioning. I made this particular image. It's a print. I made it from after I had a residency in New Zealand working with Maori scholars. And I was there doing that kind of fellowship in New Zealand with many people now that Laura knows and has been working with, and exactly asking them that same thing. I had a remarkable experience as a resident, asking them about working with Maori scholars and being able to experience a place through the eyes of the Indigenous people through my very first visit there. And I was thinking about some of the things that I was learning about the spirits that they find as kin, and the ways that these very real but invisible spirits with many different types of personalities inhabit very specific places, and they are very real. So this is a print I made in that kind of same sense. These kind of spirit, we call them spirits. Translations in English are never really very accurate. So, you know, other peoples might have Manitou. This is Wairua. So for the Maori, it's a kind of abiding presence. And so really that's where I end up here, is simply to say that in the work that I do as an artist, as an academic, I'm thinking constantly and across disciplines, really, in the different kinds of ways that I think that creative practices can help address that kind of nature about the quality and sense of being in place. But it's never with one point of view. It's always with embracing a kind of sense of multiplicity. So that's it.
Wow. Wow, thank you so much.
Wow.
More beautiful work. Those images just pull me in different directions and create questions immediately. They just immediately enter the mind and the heart. Well, I have too much to say, so I better move on and hear what others have to say, including our next one up to bat, Laura Donkers from New Zealand. So thank you very much again.